The twin suns of Zariah blazed across the sky, casting long shadows over the jagged plains that stretched as far as the eye could see. Wind swept across the rocky surface, carrying with it a scent of sulfur and distant salt from the nearby seas. Among the plains, a young figure moved with practiced grace, her movements precise, each step purposeful. Princess Kaylara, only 21, had trained her entire life for this moment, and now the time had come. She was about to face the human, the one being across galaxies who had defeated warriors far older and more experienced than she could ever hope to be. Her armor gleamed in the sunlight, not just as a sign of status, but as a symbol of countless hours of training. Every plate was polished, every joint flexible, designed for maximum mobility without sacrificing protection. Her blade rested in its sheath at her side, an extension of herself, forged from the strongest alloys of Zariah and enchanted with subtle energy channels that could cut through almost anything. Yet despite the impressive weight of her preparations, there was a strange unease in her chest. She had fought many challengers, but none like this human. The human waited in the distance, standing calmly on a small rise of rocks. At first glance, they seemed ordinary, lean, not heavily armored, not wielding any visible weapon. They did not move aggressively, did not shout challenges or threaten with gestures. Instead, they stood silently, observing Kaylara with an intensity that made her feel almost exposed. It was unsettling. She had expected fear, hesitation, or awe. There was none. Only focus. Kaylara's heart pounded as she approached. Her warriors had warned her. This human was cunning, resourceful, unpredictable. Tales spread across systems of humans surviving battles that no one else could, of defeating armies by thinking differently, rather than overpowering them. Kaylara had dismissed many such stories as exaggerations. Nothing in her training had prepared her for facing an opponent who might not even fight the way she understood combat. She stopped a few meters from the human, raising her blade in a formal challenge. The metal shimmered under the sunlight, and the wind seemed to pause as if the world itself awaited the outcome. Kaylara's voice rang out, steady despite the nervous energy coiling in her stomach. "Human, I am Princess Kaylara of Zariah. I challenge you to combat. Stand ready and may the strongest prevail." The human did not immediately respond. Their eyes, sharp and curious, studied her as if they were trying to understand her mind rather than her moves. Then slowly, they nodded once, acknowledging the challenge without arrogance or fear. Kaylara clenched her jaw. There was a quiet confidence about them that both irritated and intrigued her. She had never met an opponent who did not try to provoke her anger or fear. Kaylara moved first. She sprinted forward with the grace of a seasoned warrior, her blade cutting a path through the air with a powerful arc designed to intimidate and wound. She expected the human to flinch or retreat, but they did not. Instead, they sidestepped with ease, almost casually, their movements precise and fluid. Kaylara's first strike missed entirely. She blinked, momentarily stunned. "Interesting," the human said softly, their voice calm and steady, carrying just enough amusement to hint at awareness of her surprise. "Your speed is impressive, but you rely too heavily on your strength." "There is more to combat than force." Kaylara's eyes narrowed. She had trained her entire life to perfect her strikes, relying on speed, agility, and strength in equal measure. Yet here was a human, unarmed and unarmored, countering every move she made with minimal effort. She could feel sweat beginning to bead on her brow, not from fear, but from the realization that this battle would require more than brute force. She attacked again, faster this time, spinning and twisting in a display of agility that left streaks of sunlight on her armor. The human mirrored her rhythm in an uncanny imitation, never leaving themselves open, never overextending, always just a step ahead. Kaylara's pride burned within her. She could not allow herself to be outmatched, not in front of the observers who had gathered to witness this historic encounter. Minutes stretched like hours. Each strike Kaylara unleashed was met with perfect defense. Each movement she executed was anticipated and avoided. She began to sense a pattern, not in the human strength, but in their thinking. They were not just reacting. They were learning. Each dodge was a calculated move, each shift of weight an analysis of her technique. She realized with a mix of frustration and awe that she was facing an opponent who did not simply fight. They adapted. Kaylara's breathing grew heavier as she reassessed her approach. She had faced dozens of warriors in her life, but none had required her to think this hard in the middle of combat. She tried feints, trick she had perfected over years, hoping to catch the human off guard. Each attempt failed. Every move was anticipated, every deception countered. She began to see it clearly. This human was not just strong in body. They were strong in mind, and that strength was something she had underestimated. "Why do you not attack?" she demanded, spinning to face the human again. "Are you afraid?" The human shook their head slowly, expression calm. "I am not afraid. I do not need to attack to win. Strength is measured in many ways, and raw power alone does not determine the outcome. Watch, learn, and survive. That is the human way." Kaylara paused, absorbing the words. They were simple, yet they carried weight she had never considered. Her culture taught that courage and skill with a blade were the highest virtues. Strategy and patience were secondary. Yet here was someone, not even using a weapon, demonstrating that victory could come without aggression, that observation and understanding could turn the tide of any encounter. Her mind raced. Could she truly defeat someone who fought with such methods? She had never faced a foe who forced her to question her own techniques mid-combat. Doubt was a foreign feeling, yet it crept into her chest like a shadow, chilling her despite the warmth of the suns above. Kaylara adjusted her stance, lowering her blade slightly, trying to reset her focus. She would not allow herself to be defeated, not yet. She lunged forward again, faster, sharper, with every ounce of her skill concentrated into a single strike. The human moved as before, not hurried, not reckless, but perfectly measured. The strike passed harmlessly by, and Kaylara stumbled slightly on the uneven ground, her frustration visible even in her carefully composed armor. "You are skilled," the human said quietly. "But skill alone is not enough. You are fast, strong, precise, but you forget to see the bigger picture. You rely on what you know, not what you can learn." Kaylara clenched her fists around the hilt of her blade. They spoke with calm certainty, yet there was no arrogance, no taunting. It was almost infuriating, the way they remained composed while she fought with everything she had. She realized then that the human's greatest weapon was not in their hands or feet. It was in their mind. The wind picked up, carrying dust and grit across the battlefield, and Kaylara shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She had to focus, had to find a way to break through, yet every attempt seemed anticipated. It was as if the human could see into her moves before she made them. She tightened her grip, ready to continue. But a small voice of doubt whispered in her mind. Perhaps this was not a battle she could win by force alone. Kaylara took a deep breath, centering herself, and observed the human more carefully. Their stance was relaxed, their eyes calm, and yet they radiated an energy that spoke of countless trials and experiences. She realized that this encounter was more than a duel. It was a lesson, whether she accepted it or not. She had challenged the human, expecting to prove her strength, but now she began to understand that she might learn something far more valuable. The suns dipped slightly lower, casting long shadows across the plains. Kaylara lowered her blade fully, just for a moment, as she studied the human's movements. There was patience in their stillness, wisdom in their observation, and an unspoken understanding that battles were not always won with force. She had entered this duel eager to test herself, but she now recognized that the human's strength was something entirely different, something she had yet to comprehend. As the first part of their encounter drew to a close, Kaylara's chest heaved with exertion, and her mind buzzed with new awareness. The human had not struck once, yet they had already shown their dominance, not through violence but through presence, strategy, and understanding. She realized that the battle was far from over, but the rules were changing. She would have to think differently, move differently, and perhaps even feel differently if she wished to match this opponent. For the first time in her life, Kaylara felt a mixture of fear and excitement, a combination that was both unfamiliar and invigorating. She had trained her body to perfection, yet now she understood that her mind would be just as crucial in what was to come, and the human, standing quietly under the twin suns, watched her with an unshakable calm, as if silently inviting her to step beyond the boundaries of everything she had ever known about combat. Honor and strength. Kaylara clenched her jaw, tightened her grip on her blade, and stepped back, preparing herself for what she now realized would be more than a fight. It would be a test, a challenge not only of skill but of perspective. Kaylara's mind raced as she circled the human, her blade held ready but no longer swinging wildly. She had expected fear, hesitation, maybe even awe from this opponent, but there was none. The human remained calm, steady, their gaze unwavering. Every movement she made was mirrored by their precise sidesteps and small shifts in posture. It was as though the human could predict her thoughts, anticipating her strikes before they even happened. Frustration bubbled up inside Kaylara, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had trained for moments like this, though never against someone like this. Her pride demanded that she prove herself. She took a deep breath, adjusting her stance, readying for another strike, but this time she tried something different. Instead of lunging head first, she feinted to the left, then spun to the right, hoping to catch the human off guard. The human stepped lightly, almost lazily, shifting their weight with a grace that defied expectation. They moved just enough to avoid her blade, but they did not attack. Kaylara's strike missed by inches, and she stumbled slightly on the uneven ground, her frustration growing. She realized something uncomfortable. The human was not simply defending, they were studying her. "You fight well," the human said softly, their voice calm but filled with insight. "Your strength is impressive and your speed is exceptional, but you rely too much on what you know. You attack patterns, not possibilities. You anticipate the obvious, not the unexpected." Kaylara froze for a moment, her chest heaving as she tried to process the words. She had trained all her life to recognize patterns, to memorize techniques and execute them flawlessly. She had never considered that the enemy might not fight the same way she did. This human, seemingly ordinary and unarmed, had already forced her to question everything she had been taught. She shook her head, trying to clear the confusion. She could not allow herself to be defeated, not here, not now, in front of the witnesses who had traveled from countless star systems to see this battle. Kaylara tightened her grip on her blade and advanced again, faster, more determined. She executed a series of complex spins and strikes, a combination she had never used in practice but had mastered in theory. She expected the human to falter even slightly at least once, but the human did not falter. Each movement was anticipated, each strike evaded with minimal effort. They did not strike back, did not counterattack aggressively, but every sidestep, every shift was precise. Kaylara's chest tightened. She could feel the exhaustion beginning to creep in, though it was not physical, it was mental. Her mind strained to keep up with the human's reactions. She realized she was being outmatched, not in strength or skill, but in perception. "You are strong, but strength alone is not enough," the human said quietly. "Victory is not given to those who strike hardest, but to those who see clearly, who adapt, who endure." Kaylara's pride flared. She had never faced words like these in battle before. Her culture taught that courage and skill with a blade were supreme, that strategy and patience were secondary. She had always believed that if she was faster, stronger, and more skilled than her opponent, victory would come naturally. Yet here was someone who challenged that belief with calm certainty. Determined not to be outdone, Kaylara tried a different approach. She slowed her movements, trying to confuse the human with feints, sudden shifts, and unpredictable angles. Her goal was no longer to overpower, but to outthink. Each strike was calculated, each step deliberate. She forced herself to observe the human more closely, noticing the slight shifts in posture, the tiny changes in breathing, the subtle cues that hinted at their next movement. The human watched patiently, seemingly aware of her analysis. They made no move to exploit her mistakes, no strike to test her defenses. Instead, they moved in ways that forced her to adapt constantly, never allowing her to settle into a rhythm. Kaylara realized that this was not a traditional duel. It was a lesson, a test of her mind as much as her body. Minutes stretched, though it felt like hours. Kaylara's muscles ached from the constant tension, but her mind was sharper than ever. She began to see patterns, not in the human's movements, but in the way they approached the fight. They were calm, patient, and observant, treating each attack as data to be studied rather than a threat to be destroyed. This realization struck her like a cold wind. She had always measured opponents by how hard they struck, never by how they thought. For the first time, Kaylara felt a flicker of doubt. Could she truly defeat someone who did not fight like a warrior, who did not rely on strength or aggression, but on adaptability and intelligence? She shook the thought away, unwilling to surrender mentally before the battle had even progressed. She was a princess of Zoraya, a trained warrior, and she would not be outmatched, not easily. She adjusted her stance again, lowering her blade and taking a careful step forward. She would test the human in a new way, challenging not just their reflexes but their endurance. She feinted, shifted, and lunged, combining speed with precision, hoping to create an opening. The human moved as always, sidestepping and avoiding each attack with minimal motion. Kelara's strike landed against nothing but air. She stumbled again, her heart racing, but she did not stop. She had to keep pushing, had to find a weakness. Her pride would not allow her to yield. "You are learning," the human said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "And that is good. But learning is not enough. You must understand. Observation without understanding is like strength without purpose." Kelara froze mid-step, her mind spinning. She had trained to act, to react, to fight. She had never been forced to think so deeply during combat. Each word from the human carried meaning but also challenge. She had to question her own assumptions, reconsider what it meant to be strong, and adapt her strategy entirely. The wind picked up, whipping dust and grit across the battlefield, and Kelara blinked rapidly to clear her vision. She took a moment to breathe, to center herself. The human stood quietly, waiting, patient, unhurried. It was almost maddening, this calmness in the face of her attacks. She realized that the human was not just defending. They were teaching her, forcing her to confront her limitations and rethink what it meant to fight. Kelara's pride, which had been a source of strength, now became a weight she had to bear. She could not simply rely on skill or speed. She had to think, adapt, and perhaps even change the way she approached combat entirely. For a moment she felt fear, a rare and unfamiliar emotion. Not fear of injury, but fear of failure, of realizing that all her training might be insufficient against this opponent. She shook the thought away and took a deep breath. She would not falter. She would continue, not just to prove herself, but to learn. Each movement, each strike was now a question, an experiment. She watched the human more closely, noting how they shifted their weight, how their gaze never wavered, how their calm presence seemed to absorb her aggression rather than repel it. Kelara realized that she was changing, even mid-battle. Her mind sharpened, her perception widened, and her respect for this human grew. She'd expected a test of strength, but this was a test of everything she had learned, everything she thought she knew. The human's methods were unfamiliar, but she could sense their effectiveness. She had to adapt or fail. The sons of Zoraya continued their slow descent, casting long shadows across the plains. Kelara circled the human, her blade raised, her mind alert, and her heart pounding. She understood now that this battle would not be decided by who struck hardest, but by who could think, adapt, and endure the longest. And in that realization she felt a spark of excitement, a challenge that was deeper and more rewarding than any she had faced before. The human stood silently, observing, patient, and calm. Kelara knew that the next phase of the battle would not be about speed or strength alone. It would be about understanding, insight, and the willingness to embrace a new way of thinking. She adjusted her grip on her blade, tightened her stance, and prepared to continue, ready to face whatever came next with determination, respect, and an open mind. For the first time in her life, Kelara felt that she was not just fighting an opponent, she was learning from one. And that understanding made her stronger, even as her pride demanded victory. The duel was far from over, but the rules had changed, and Kelara knew that she would never face another battle in the same way again. Kelara felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration as she stood on the rocky plains of Zoraya. Her muscles ached from the relentless movement, and sweat streamed down her face beneath the weight of her armor. Yet, despite the strain, she felt sharper, more aware, more alive than ever before. The human had not struck her even once, yet she already understood that their presence carried a power far beyond the reach of any blade. The human stood a few meters away, calm and steady, their expression serene but alert. They had not moved aggressively, had not attempted to dominate or intimidate, yet every instinct Kelara had honed over years of training told her that this opponent was far more dangerous than any warrior she had ever faced. Her pride, which had driven her to challenge the human in the first place, now simmered with curiosity. She wanted to understand them, to grasp the secret of their strength. Kelara adjusted her grip on her sword and stepped forward again, her movements deliberate this time. She would no longer rely solely on speed or force. She would observe, adapt, and test the human in ways she had never considered. Every strike, every feint, every shift of her body was calculated, an experiment to gauge their reaction. The human moved with the same calm precision as before, sidestepping and shifting effortlessly, never overextending, never giving her an opening. Kelara realized that this was not just a duel. It was a conversation in motion, a silent exchange of strategy and insight. Each action she took was met with an almost imperceptible response, a counter that was not meant to harm but to challenge her understanding. Frustration and admiration warred within Kailara. She had trained her whole life to become a master of combat. Yet here was someone who taught her more through stillness and observation than she had learned in years of sparring with the fiercest warriors of Zoraya. She forced herself to focus, to push aside pride and ego, and to embrace the lesson hidden within this encounter. "You have power," the human said quietly, their voice carrying across the wind-swept plains. "But power alone is not enough. You must learn to see, to understand, to adapt. Strength without thought is fleeting, like water in your hands. Observe, learn, and you will endure." Kailara's eyes narrowed, but she did not speak. She understood the truth in the human's words. Every strike she had attempted had been anticipated, every movement countered. The realization stung, but it also ignited a new determination within her. She would not give up. She would not be broken. She would rise, stronger not just in body but in mind. With renewed focus, Kailara changed her approach. She slowed her movements, making them less predictable. She combined feints with genuine strikes, testing not just the human's reflexes but their patience and perception. She studied their reactions carefully, noting how their weight shifted, how their gaze followed her every motion, how they seemed to anticipate her intentions without hesitation. The human did not attack. They did not need to. Their defense was complete, precise, and elegant. Kailara began to understand that this was a different kind of strength, one that relied not on violence but on control, awareness, and the ability to respond rather than react. She realized that in this duel, victory was not measured in wounds or blood, but in understanding and adaptation. Kailara's mind raced as she considered the implications. She had always believed that skill and courage were the ultimate measures of a warrior. She had trained to be faster, stronger, and more precise than anyone else. But here was someone who challenged that belief, showing her that true mastery required more than physical prowess. It required insight, patience, and the ability to see beyond the immediate moment. She lunged forward again, testing the human's responses. This time, she combined a feint with a series of rapid strikes, each designed to probe for weaknesses. The human moved as expected, sidestepping with ease, yet Kailara noticed something subtle, a slight shift in their stance, a micro-adjustment that hinted at awareness of her strategy. She realized that even the human, as calm and composed as they seemed, was learning from her actions. The thought surprised her. She had expected to learn from them, but now she saw that the exchange was mutual. Each of them observed, adapted, and adjusted. This was not a one-sided lesson. It was a dialogue of skill and strategy, a test of minds as much as bodies. Kailara felt a new respect for the human growing within her, mingled with the fierce desire to rise to their level. Minutes stretched into hours, though it felt like only moments had passed. Kailara's movements became more fluid, more precise, not because she was stronger or faster, but because she was thinking differently. She considered angles, timing, and intention. She watched the human carefully, anticipating their responses and adjusting her strategy accordingly. She realized that she was beginning to match their rhythm, not in raw power but in awareness and adaptability. "You are learning quickly," the human said, a faint smile appearing on their face, "but understanding takes time. You must not rush. Patience is as important as skill, and observation as important as action." Kailara nodded, acknowledging the truth in their words. She had always been impatient, eager to prove herself through bold action. Now she understood that patience, observation, and subtlety were equally vital in combat. She lowered her blade slightly, not in submission but in focus, ready to continue with renewed clarity. The wind shifted, carrying dust across the plains, and Kailara felt a sense of calm wash over her, despite the ongoing tension. She moved with a new rhythm, each step measured, each strike deliberate. She was no longer fighting blindly. She was engaging in a dance of strategy and insight, testing herself against a mind as sharp as any blade. The human remained patient, responding to her movements with effortless precision. Kailara began to notice patterns not in their defense, but in their approach to the battle itself. They did not rely on aggression, yet they commanded the encounter. They did not strike first, yet they shaped every movement of the duel. She realized that the humans' greatest strength was their understanding, their ability to control the flow of action without ever forcing it. Kalara's respect deepened, and with it, a sense of humility. She had entered this duel expecting to prove her superiority, but she now understood that the human had already shown her a greater form of mastery, one that combined mind, perception, and patience in ways she had never imagined. With renewed determination, Kalara pushed forward, testing her limits. She executed a series of complex maneuvers combining speed, agility, and feints, attempting to find an opening. The human moved as before, sidestepping and adjusting with minimal effort. But Kalara noticed something new, a faint hesitation, a micro-shift that suggested awareness of her strategy. Her heart raced with excitement. She was learning, adapting, and for the first time she felt that she could match this opponent, not in raw power but in understanding. She realized that the duel was not about defeating the human in a traditional sense, but about transcending her previous limitations, about growing stronger in mind as well as body. "You are different from others," the human said softly, their voice carrying a note of approval. "You are willing to see beyond what you have been taught. That is the first step toward true mastery. Remember, strength is not just in the arm or the blade, but in the mind that wields them." Kalara's chest swelled with a mix of pride and humility. She had always sought recognition through victory, through displays of skill and courage. Yet here was someone who taught her that true power came from understanding, adaptation, and the courage to learn. She felt a spark of inspiration ignite within her, a new determination to rise not just as a warrior, but as a thinker, a strategist, and a leader. As the suns of Zariah dipped lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, Kalara adjusted her stance once more. Her blade gleamed in the fading light, but it no longer felt like the sole source of her strength. She understood that her mind, her awareness, and her ability to adapt were just as vital. She felt a new confidence not in overpowering her opponent, but in her ability to grow, to learn, and to endure. The human watched her silently, their calm presence a steady anchor amidst the intensity of the duel. Kalara realized that she had not only survived this encounter, but had begun to understand the deeper lessons it offered. She had faced an opponent who challenged every assumption she had held, yet she had adapted, learned, and grown stronger because of it. With a final deep breath, Kalara readied herself for the next phase of their encounter. She knew that this duel was far from over, but she also knew that she was no longer the same warrior who had challenged the human hours before. She had begun a journey of understanding and adaptation, one that would shape her future in ways she had never imagined. The plains of Zariah stretched out around them, silent witnesses to the battle of minds and bodies, of tradition and innovation, of pride and humility. And in that silence, Kalara and the human continued their dance, each learning from the other, each pushing the boundaries of what it meant to be truly strong. The sun had begun its slow descent, painting the plains of Zariah in shades of gold and crimson. Kalara stood still for a moment, letting the wind brush against her face as she considered the events of the day. Her muscles ached, her armor was scratched and dusty, yet her mind felt sharper than ever. The human's calm, patient approach to combat had forced her to rethink everything she knew about strength and skill. She realized that to grow stronger, she would have to embrace new ways of thinking. Not just in battle, but in life. The human stood a short distance away. Their posture relaxed, yet their eyes remained attentive, tracking her every movement. Kalara noticed the small details she had missed before, the subtle ways the human shifted their weight, the way their breathing was measured, the calm confidence that radiated from them. Every detail was a lesson, every movement a model of efficiency. She had never encountered someone who could teach so much without speaking or striking. Kalara took a deep breath and lowered her blade. She had challenged the human expecting a fight, yet she realized that the encounter had already become something far more valuable, a learning experience. She could feel the weight of her pride pressing against the new understanding that was forming inside her. Her people had always valued speed, power, and skill with weapons, but here was someone showing her that patience, observation, and intelligence could be just as vital. "You have learned quickly," the human said softly, their voice calm and steady. "But learning is not enough. True strength comes from understanding and applying what you learn. You must see beyond what is obvious, beyond what you expect. You must adapt or you will be left behind." Kalara nodded, acknowledging the truth in their words. She had begun to see the limitations in her own training, the blind spots in the techniques she had relied on for years. She realized that she had been strong in the ways her culture valued, but perhaps weak in ways she had never considered. This realization was humbling but also energizing. She wanted to grow, to expand her skills, to become a warrior in a new sense, one who combined body, mind, and insight. The human gestured toward a nearby ridge. "Come," they said. "There is more to learn beyond this battlefield. You must see how to apply your understanding in situations that cannot be predicted. True tests are not fought with blades alone." Kelara hesitated for a moment, but curiosity and the desire to improve outweighed caution. She followed the human, leaving the familiar open plains behind and moving toward the rocky ridges that marked the edge of their training grounds. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. She noticed how the human navigated the terrain with ease, using the rocks, slopes, and shadows to their advantage. Kelara realized that terrain, environment, and awareness were as important as skill with a weapon. They reached a narrow canyon, the walls rising high on either side. The human paused, their eyes scanning the area. "Here you will face challenges that cannot be solved with strength alone," they said. "You will need to observe, think, and adapt. Do not rely on instinct alone. You must use your mind as much as your body." Kelara's heart quickened. She had trained for physical challenges her entire life, but she realized that this would be different. She would be tested not just in combat, but in her ability to strategize, to see patterns, and to respond creatively. She gripped her blade tightly, though she knew that force alone would not be the answer this time. The human moved first, stepping lightly across the uneven rocks, demonstrating balance and careful observation. Kelara followed, trying to mirror their movements. She noticed small pitfalls in the terrain, loose stones that could shift under her weight and sudden drops that could throw her off balance. The human navigated these effortlessly, their movements precise and confident. Kelara realized that her awareness of her surroundings had to become just as sharp as her skill with a blade. As they progressed deeper into the canyon, the human stopped at a fork in the path. "You must choose your way carefully," they said. "Each path has challenges. Some are obvious, some are hidden. You must observe, predict, and adapt." Kelara looked at the paths, her mind racing. One route was narrow and steep, with jagged rocks jutting out, while the other was wider but shadowed, hiding potential hazards. She hesitated, realizing that this decision would require more than instinct. She had to analyze, anticipate, and choose wisely. After a moment, Kelara stepped onto the narrower path, moving cautiously, testing each foothold before committing her weight. The rocks shifted slightly, but she maintained balance. Remembering the human's lesson about observation and patience, she realized that choosing carefully, even slowly, could prevent mistakes that brute force could not fix. The human followed, silently observing her progress. Kelara felt a surge of confidence as she navigated the difficult path, understanding that this was the first real test of her new approach. She was learning to think ahead, to anticipate dangers, and to act with precision rather than speed alone. Suddenly, a rock shifted under her foot, and Kelara stumbled, barely catching herself. She realized that the canyon was not just a physical challenge, but a mental one as well. Panic would lead to mistakes. Careful thought would allow her to endure. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and continued, more aware of every movement, every step. The human spoke again, their voice calm and encouraging. "Do not be afraid to fail. Each mistake is a lesson. Observe what happens, learn, and adjust. Strength is not just in avoiding failure, but in recovering from it." Kelara nodded, absorbing the wisdom. She had always believed that failure was a sign of weakness, but she now saw that true strength came from resilience, adaptation, and the willingness to learn. She moved forward, applying this understanding to every step, every adjustment in her stance. As they continued, the canyon presented more challenges, hidden crevices, loose stones, and sudden drops that demanded careful planning. Kelara began to see patterns, noticing how the terrain changed and how she could use it to her advantage. She moved with growing confidence, combining observation, balance, and timing in ways she had never considered during her training on flat battlegrounds. The human watched silently, occasionally offering subtle guidance. "You are improving," they said. "You are learning to see beyond the obvious. Remember, the mind is the greatest weapon. The body alone is not enough." Kelara felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced challenges that would have overwhelmed her before, yet she had adapted, learned, and overcome them. She realized that her understanding of strength had shifted. It was no longer about raw power or speed, but about perception, patience, and the ability to respond creatively to unforeseen challenges. At the canyon's end, they emerged onto a flat plateau overlooking the plains below. The human paused, turning to Kailara. "You have done well today," they said. "But this is only the beginning. True mastery is not about defeating an opponent in a single fight, but about enduring, adapting, and growing through every challenge life presents." Kailara looked out over the plains, reflecting on the lessons she had learned. She felt a sense of humility mixed with newfound confidence. She had challenged the human expecting a simple duel, but she had gained far more insight, strategy, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to be truly strong. She realized that the human strength lay not in weapons or armor, but in their mind, their awareness, and their ability to adapt. These were qualities that could not be measured by speed, skill, or power alone. She understood now that to become a great warrior, she would need to cultivate her mind as much as her body, to observe, learn, and adapt in ways she had never considered. Kailara turned to the human, her eyes filled with gratitude and respect. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I have learned more from you today than I ever could have imagined. I see now that strength is more than just skill with the blade. It is insight, patience, and the courage to adapt." The human nodded, a faint smile on their face. "You are beginning to understand. The journey is long and the lessons never end. But you have taken the first step. Remember what you have learned here, and you will be ready for anything the universe presents." Kailara felt a deep sense of purpose welling up inside her. She knew that she would never see the world or herself the same way again. She had begun a transformation, one that would shape her future as a warrior, a leader, and a thinker. She understood now that battles were not won by force alone, but by awareness, adaptability, and the willingness to learn from every encounter. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plateau, Kailara felt a sense of calm and determination. She had faced her own limitations, learned from a seemingly ordinary human, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. She knew that the challenges ahead would test her further, but she was ready to face them, armed not only with her blade but with insight, strategy, and the lessons she had gained. The wind swept across the plateau, carrying the sense of distant seas and rocky plains. Kailara stood tall, her eyes on the horizon, her mind clear and her spirit unbroken. She had begun a journey that would take her beyond what she had ever imagined, and she was determined to continue, to grow, and to become a warrior in every sense of the word. The first light of dawn touched the plains of Zoria, casting a soft glow over the jagged rocks and windswept terrain. Kailara stood at the edge of a cliff, her blade strapped to her side, but it no longer felt like the center of her strength. Today would be the final test, not of speed, skill, or force alone, but of all she had learned: observation, patience, adaptability, and insight. She breathed deeply, feeling the cool morning air fill her lungs, centering herself for the challenge ahead. The human approached quietly, their presence calm and reassuring. Kailara had spent the past days learning from them, walking the rugged canyons, navigating treacherous terrain, and confronting obstacles that demanded more than her usual fighting skill. With every step she had grown stronger, not just physically but mentally. She had learned to see beyond the obvious, to anticipate, to adapt, and to embrace the unexpected. "You are ready," the human said softly. "But readiness is not just about skill. It is about mindset. Today you will face a challenge that tests everything you have learned." Kailara nodded, feeling a mixture of anticipation and calm determination. She no longer felt the anxiety that had filled her when she first stepped onto the plains. She had faced the human, the one everyone said could not be defeated, and in doing so, she had learned lessons that went beyond combat. Today she was prepared to apply those lessons in a way that would prove her transformation, not only to herself, but to her people. Before them lay a narrow valley surrounded by jagged cliffs. A series of obstacles stretched across the ground, loose stones, hidden pits, and unstable platforms that would test her balance and awareness. Beyond that, a steep ridge marked the way to the final summit. The challenge was clear. Kailara had to navigate the terrain safely, reach the summit, and demonstrate not only skill with her body, but insight and adaptability in every move. Kailara took her first step, her mind alert to every detail. She noticed a loose stone near the edge of the path and adjusted her footing. She saw shadows that suggested hidden drops and tested the ground lightly before committing her weight. Each step was deliberate, a careful balance of observation and action. She was no longer relying on instinct alone. She was using every lesson the human had taught her. The human followed at a short distance, watching silently, allowing Kaylara to navigate the obstacles on her own. They did not interfere, but their presence was a steady anchor, a reminder that guidance was available if she needed it. Kaylara felt a surge of confidence. She was learning to trust her mind as much as her body, to combine skill, awareness, and strategy into a single, cohesive approach. As she progressed through the valley, Kaylara encountered her first real test, a series of jagged rocks that formed a narrow path above a steep drop. Her previous training would have allowed her to leap quickly across, relying on speed and agility alone. But she remembered the human's lessons: observation, patience, and understanding. She studied the rocks carefully, testing each one before stepping, adjusting her balance with precision. Slowly but steadily, she made her way across without misstep. At the end of the path, Kaylara paused to catch her breath, realizing how much she had changed. She had faced challenges that would have overwhelmed her before, yet now she moved with calm confidence, aware of her surroundings and mindful of every movement. She was no longer just a warrior relying on strength and skill. She was a strategist, a thinker, a learner. The next challenge came quickly. A hidden pit, partially covered by loose stones, blocked her path. In the past, she might have jumped recklessly or tried to leap over in a single bound, risking injury. Now she paused, observing carefully, testing the edges and planning her move. She discovered a safe path along the side, using a combination of balance and timing to cross safely. Each success reinforced her new understanding. Patience, observation, and adaptability were just as vital as strength and skill. Beyond the pit, the terrain grew steeper, the slope leading to the final ridge. Loose gravel and jagged rocks made footing treacherous. Kaylara adjusted her approach, moving deliberately, using her legs to absorb the shifting ground and maintain balance. She felt the strain in her muscles. But it was different from before, focused, controlled, and guided by insight rather than panic or force. Halfway up the ridge, a sudden gust of wind swept across the cliffs, threatening to throw her off balance. Kaylara froze for a moment, then adjusted her stance, planting her feet firmly and leaning into the wind. She felt the lessons of the past days guiding her: adapt to the environment, anticipate the unexpected, and respond with clarity. Step by step, she continued upward, each movement deliberate and measured. The human watched quietly, nodding once in approval. Kaylara realized that their presence had become less about instruction and more about support. She had internalized the lessons, transforming them into instinctive awareness. She was no longer learning from the human in the same way. She was applying what she had learned to overcome challenges independently. At last, Kaylara reached the summit of the ridge. The view stretched out before her. The plains of Zoraya bathed in the golden light of dawn, the jagged cliffs casting long shadows across the terrain she had traversed. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, but more importantly, a profound understanding of herself. She had faced the human, adapted to their teachings, and emerged stronger in mind, body, and spirit. The human approached, standing beside her quietly. "You have done well," they said. "You have learned to observe, to adapt, and to endure. You have proven that true strength is more than skill or speed. It is insight, patience, and the willingness to grow." Kaylara turned to them, gratitude and respect shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "I have learned more than I ever imagined. You showed me that strength is not just about the blade or the arm. It is about the mind, the heart, and the ability to adapt." The human smiled faintly. "The journey does not end here. There will always be new challenges, new lessons, but you have taken a great step. You have become a warrior in the truest sense." Kaylara felt a surge of determination. She understood now that her role as a princess and a warrior carried greater responsibility. She had the power to lead her people, to teach them not just strength but awareness, adaptability, and resilience. She felt ready to return to her kingdom, not as the same proud young warrior who had challenged the human, but as a transformed leader who could inspire and guide others. As they began their descent from the ridge, Kaylara moved with a calm confidence. She navigated the terrain with ease, her mind sharp and her awareness keen. Every step was guided by the lessons she had learned, every movement a reflection of her growth. The human walked beside her, a quiet companion, allowing her to lead the way. When they reached the plains, Kalara paused, looking out across the horizon. The journey had tested her in ways she had never anticipated, forcing her to confront her own limitations and embrace new methods of thinking. She had learned that true strength came from a combination of skill, observation, adaptability, and resilience. She had learned that victory was not always measured in force but in understanding and insight. The human turned to her, their eyes calm and steady. "Are you ready to return to your people?" they asked. Kalara nodded. "Yes, I am ready. I will lead them with what I have learned. I will show them that strength is more than skill. It is understanding, adaptability, and courage in every form." As she prepared to leave the plains and return to her kingdom, Kalara felt a sense of peace and purpose. She had faced the human, learned from them, and grown stronger than she had ever imagined. She knew that the path ahead would not always be easy, but she felt ready to meet whatever challenges came her way. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the vast expanse of Zoraya. Kalara took a deep breath, feeling the wind against her face, and stepped forward with confidence. She was no longer just a princess or a warrior defined by her blade. She was a leader, a thinker, and a learner, ready to face the universe with insight, courage, and strength. The human walked beside her, silent but supportive, a reminder that even the greatest warriors could learn, grow, and adapt. Kalara felt a deep gratitude for their guidance and the lessons she had received. She had been challenged, tested, and transformed, and she knew that she would carry these lessons with her always. As they continued toward the horizon, Kalara glanced at the human one last time. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for showing me what it truly means to be strong." The human nodded, a faint smile on their face. "You have done the work yourself. I only showed the way. The strength is yours always." Kalara felt a surge of pride and humility together. She had faced her own limitations, embraced new ways of thinking, and emerged stronger than ever. She knew that the future held challenges, but she was ready. She had learned that true victory came not from defeating others, but from mastering oneself, growing through every trial, and leading with insight and courage. As the plains stretched before her, Kalara walked forward with renewed purpose. She had begun the journey as a young warrior princess, seeking to test her strength. But she would return as a leader who embodied a new kind of mastery, one that combined skill, intelligence, adaptability, and resilience. She was